In the next set of lessons, we're going to work with procedural connections, how to update database information, how to get information from the database, and how to work with your database information. So the previous lessons just showed you how we can create a brand new table and how we can access that table, make our connection using procedural PHP. And we're using MySQL Connect to do that. So in order to actually utilize the data in the database, we need to still keep that connection there. And this is why sometimes you're going to see all of this within another file so that we can just simply link out to them and access that information. So I'm going to show you how we can actually start inserting some information into this newly created test area table. So I'm going to move this down here because I do want to be able to see what columns I have available for me in the table. And so this, just to show you how this is going to work, so if I go to the test table here, if I go to insert, and maybe I want to insert, so we typically don't insert those auto increments, so I'm going to type the company name, maybe the size of the company, so we're going to do 100, and contact. So do something like that and hit go. And we see that, so our ID, it's actually asking for an ID here, so we can't leave it blank here, so we need to set a value for it. And I believe that in this table we probably don't have that auto increment set up. So we see that we get this query here. So insert test table, and let's take a look at the structure of it. So we don't have the auto increment on it, so it really didn't know what to do with the ID value, and that's why it was trying to ask for that. And plus we did have that within our query as well, so we're specifying ID and so on. So we don't need to specify this if we have our auto increment, so we could do something like this, get rid of that. And now if I went over to this test area A, and I believe this is the one that we're going to try to access, so save that and go, we can see that we can really easily add in information, and let's just refresh that and take another look at that. So query has been executed, and we're selecting all the information from test area. I believe that problem was that it should be test area, not test table, so it was putting that information into test table. So that we always have to make sure that we're putting it within that right table. So now let's go back here, and we see that our information has been inserted. And we see how the auto increment is working here, that it's automatically adding in that one, whereas down here, when I ran that query several times, I've got multiple of the same entries here, and we don't want to have that because we don't have any way to distinguish between this row and that row. So that's why auto increment is important. Let's go back into our PHP code, and we'll set up our query. So insert into test area, and this is the information. So maybe this time I want to change this value to 50, and I'm going to just make up a name here. So make up a company name. So there we've got our query string, and now this is going to be relatively the same thing as we did to create the table. So all we'd have to do, we've got our query string here, and this is one of the reasons why I usually like to separate out those query strings from my actual MySQL query. Of course, we can just take this whole string and we could paste that within the query and save us a line of code. But if you do need to make some adjustments, make some changes, it's always better, it's a lot more readable when you've do have it separated out like this. So I usually do like to keep it separated out. So I'm just going to write here, new entry added. And that's it. So, and we already set up that query previously. We've got the errors there and so on. And maybe one thing too that we might want to do here is maybe we want to just close off our connection. So once we've finished working with it, we'll just close off that open connection that's under link. And that should be it. So let's check this out and see how this works out. So now when we see it, now if I go back into test area, we can see that we do have that entry added in. If I refresh it a bunch of times, and this is what's really neat about the auto increment, is that we get all of this auto increment, and we do now have a way to differentiate between all of these entries. We can see we've got 2, 3, 4, and we can call back according to the ID and pull that information back and utilize it within our code.